Hey everybody, it's Double M from the Touch 'Em Up podcast, and I've got some very exciting news. I'm thrilled to announce my partnership with BetStamp and Sign Up Expert. Now you may be wondering what that is, but this is opening up an incredible opportunity for you to join some of my favorite sports books in order to get the best odds and new user offers depending on the event. Head over to my dedicated sign-up page, which I've linked in the description at signupexpert.com/touchemup. This will allow you to explore a selection of sports books tailor-made to your specific region without you having to do any additional work. So without any further ado, if you're ready to support the Touch 'Em Up podcast just one step further and also catapult your sports betting experience at the same time, make sure to follow my Sign Up Expert link that's posted in the description of this video whenever you sign up to a new sportsbook. And without any further ado, let's get today's video started. You're listening to the Touch 'Em Up podcast. I'm your host, Double M, and on today's episode, we have UFC Vegas, Lemos versus Jandiroba, live from the UFC Apex this upcoming Saturday, July 20th at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. In the main event of the evening, you have a battle in the women's 115-pound strawweight division between top 5 contenders, the quintessential striker versus grappler with the heavy-handed Muay Thai specialist in Amanda Amandina Lemos, who comes in at number 3 in the strawweight division, taking on the grappling and wrestling standout in the number 5 Verna Jandiroba. So without any further ado, let's get this started and step into the ring. All right, everybody, we're back for this week's UFC fight card breakdown. Obviously, we did okay on last week's card. Way better on the main card than we did on the prelims. Almost came through with that Cody Brundage pick. I thought we were going to get another DQ victory. As much as you don't want to believe me, that's part of the reason I made him the dog pick of the week. Because even though we weren't wrong, because it was a no contest, he was on his way to losing. But if there was like an elbow to the back of the head or a shot to the back of the head, you knew Brundage was going to take the easy way out. And I mean, it was pretty much the exact same as the Jacob Malhoun fight. So I'm kind of surprised they didn't give Cody Brundage the DQ win there. But yeah, I don't think we're going to see Brundage in the UFC. Maybe for one more fight. And I think that might be it, man. I don't think they want to see him in there very much. Came through on the main event with the pick on the podcast. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I put a little bit of money on Tracy Cortez, and I just didn't know the mental state of Namajunas coming into this fight, and that's usually the biggest question mark when you're looking at a Namajunas fight. It's not a technical issue. She's one of the best technical women's MMA fighters on the planet. You know, I think she's much better as a well-rounded mixed martial artist than most people. I think she's better than Valentina as a well-rounded mixed martial artist. I think her and Alexa Grasso would actually be the best fight in that division. And I think Blanchfield and Namajunas is also a really solid fight. But, I mean, Namajunas dominated most of the fight. She probably lost round 5. But other than that, I mean, 4 rounds to 1 for Namajunas. She's probably looking at a title shot coming off a win over Amanda Ribas and Tracy Cortez. But, you know, if you're a fan of Tracy Cortez for her fighting reasons or her fighting technique, she's not bad. She's got a lot of heart. She goes forward. She looks for takedowns. Her striking isn't great. You know, she was getting picked apart, but she was getting picked apart by one of the best strikers in the division. I think Tracy Cortez has the heart. I think she has the ability to push through a lot of situations where other girls in that division probably would quit. And there were multiple times where she could have quit in that fight, and she just kept pushing forward. And she showcased good cardio on, 2 weeks notice or 2.5, 3 weeks notice. And I really think that goes to show you how serious Tracy Cortez is about her game. Yes, she lost. Shit happens. But I think Tracy Cortez is going to show us how good she really is in her next 1 or 2 fights in this division. I'm not saying I think she's going to be a champion, but I think with a few adjustments, I think she can beat some girls in the top 5. So I like the performance from both girls, but Rose clearly won it. Probably that's the best she's looked at 125. Other than that, how about Gene Silva? We had Gene Silva, second round TKO, I believe, on the podcast, and Gene Silva went in there, and there were points where him and Dober were going back and forth, but he clipped him with that spinning back elbow, shades of Bruno Ferreira taking on Dustin Stoltzfus, and then he hit him with another one that opened up the cut even wider, and ended up getting a TKO doctor stoppage. I believe it was towards the end of the second round. It might have been early in the third. I think it was early in the third, actually. Let me check. Yeah, 128 in round 3. We had some decent picks in terms of the betting on this card. I parlayed stuff with things I shouldn't have and came up on the losing end, so that's my fault. I'm going to single bet everything from now on, at least try to. But we had Silva TKO round 2-3, I think at plus 550. We had Evan Elder submission 2-3 over Darius Flowers, which was plus 600. Montel Jackson, man. We said in the breakdown that he had better striking than Damon Blackshear, but we thought the wrestling was going to play a factor. And I guess all that time at Tiger Muay Thai got Damon a little bit too confident in his striking, and he walked right into a 1-2 from from Montel Jackson and got sat down in the first round. I think the under 2.5 in that fight was like plus 275. It was a hefty price tag for that fight to go under. I know it was at least over plus 200, and it ended in 15 seconds, 13 seconds. He breaks the record from Peyton Talbot, who had that fastest knockout in bantamweight history when he knocked out Giannis Gamorre at UFC 303. The card was okay. I'm not going to say it was amazing. I think the best fight on the card was Drew Dober and Gene Silva. But, Josh Van and Charles Johnson, that's probably the last one I'm going to talk about on the card before we get into next week. How about, well, no, we got to talk about one more, but how about Charles Johnson knocking out Josh Van in round 3? Now, I've bet Charles Johnson to win in round 3 in his last 3 fights, and he got so close so many times and he didn't get it done. This time, I don't even sprinkle on Charles Johnson to win in round 3 because I figured the pace, downloading the data, the forward pressure, the boxing combinations, I figured Van was just going to start piecing him up. He hits him with a right hook from southpaw, switches to orthodox, and follows up with a right uppercut and slumps Joshua Van 20 seconds into round 3. My buddy, I'll give you a little shout out on the podcast. I call him Narco Cop Guy. He's a big Narco Cop guy. I love Narco Cop. No shade against him. I'd love to get on a podcast and break down cards with him in the future if we're ever able to get it together. But he said that Johnson round 3 was plus 2,500. I should have looked at the odds and played that because I've played it in all of his other fights. Even if I thought Josh Van was going to win, I should have played it. But shout out to Charles Johnson. Biggest win of his UFC career by far. And Josh Van will be back. Josh Van will be back. Don't you worry. But yeah, the last one we're going to talk about is Julian Erosa with a first-round guillotine choke submission over Christian Rodriguez. I fully believe this is karma from the Isaac Dolgarian fight. I fully believe it. I think that Isaac Dolgarian got robbed in that fight. Best case scenario for C-Rod, it was a draw. I did rewatch the fight going into this week, but I thought C-Rod's boxing was just going to piece up Erosa. And I mean, it was. That wasn't a bad analysis because he was piecing him up. But man, I mean, just watching that fight, I'm surprised Erosa took some of those shots. The straight left down the middle, the 3-2, the jab, the 1-2. I mean, they were clipping Erosa clean on the chin. He wasn't even rolling with the punches. Erosa was just like, come on, let's go. Come on, bop, bop, bop. He's walking through all of his shots. They end up in a scramble on the mat, and Erosa is in the guard C-Rod's in Erosa's guard, and he reaches over the far shoulder to then come back the other way and open up the pathway for the guillotine. That far shoulder reaching over and then turning the opposite way to open up a little bit more space. He locks in the body triangle from the bottom, which in every other situation, a body triangle from the bottom is a purely defensive position. But when you have a guillotine locked in, if you switch to the body triangle, it's nearly impossible to get out unless they fight the guillotine and then turn their body towards the side that the lock is on. Because then you can get to your side, alleviate some of the pressure, and put a lot of pressure on their foot and make them break that body triangle and probably allow yourself to get out. But you got to watch out for them breaking the lock. Excuse me. Sinuses are bad today. You got to watch out for them breaking the lock and then transitioning to like a Darce or an Anaconda as you try to circle out and get away. But man, Julian Erosa, first round sub over Christian Rodriguez. That's the biggest win of his career. And this is another situation where I picked Rodriguez by KO, but I even said, go back and listen to last week. The only way Erosa wins is by submission, and it probably would be a guillotine on a bad takedown attempt or in a scramble. And what do you know? The good old guillotine from Julian Erosa comes through again. This guy has so many wins, high-level wins by submission. It's crazy. I love Juicy J. Shout out to him, even though he ruined my parlays, but you know, it's the name of the game. Can't blame the fighters. It's just how MMA works, man. It's one of the most unpredictable sports in the world.
All right, but enough talk about last week. Let's get into this week's card, and we're going to kick it off with a battle in the lightweight division between Loik Radzhabov, or I believe it's Razabov, or Radzhabov, however you say it, taking on Trey Ogden. Ogden 17-6. Radzhabov is 18-5-1. I think this fight is actually pretty confusing when it comes to breaking it down because it can go one of two ways. The fighter who has more power is Loik Radzhabov. The fighter who has heavier forward pressure is Radzhabov, or Radzhabov, I believe is how you actually say it. And Loik also can wrestle. He can grapple. He got a ton of takedowns against Esteban Ribovic, who I believe to be one of the best prospects in the lightweight division. And Trey Ogden is also a good wrestler. He can wrestle. He can get takedowns. We saw it against Kurt Holloway. He was able to defend any submission attempts and just constantly rinse and repeat with the takedowns, forward pressure, getting to the top position, and kind of controlling him from the top. We've seen Trey Ogden lose to guys like Ignacio Bahamondes, and you know, he's looked good in other fights as well. Looked amazing, probably the best he's ever looked in the Nicholas Mota fight. And I think a lot of people are going to come in and compare Mota to a guy like Radzhabov, but there's really no comparison. Yes, they both have big power in their hands, but Radzhabov's a much more well-rounded fighter than Nicholas Mota. Radzhabov can go for takedowns, he can wrestle, he can get knockouts in the third round. I mean, just watch that fight against the guy from the Contender Series in Kareem El-Sawadi. He was, looking like he was going to lose that fight going into round 3 by TKO, and he lands a big overhand and knocks out his opponent in the beginning of the third round when it looked like he was on death's door in terms of the cardio. The fighter with better cardio, the fighter with a better 15-minute pace is Trey Ogden. He uses a good jab. Decent, can go question mark kick off the lead leg. Left hook. It's usually a very lean hand heavy attack from Trey Ogden. Jab, check hook, jab, lead teep kick to the body, 1-2 down the middle, cross into the lead hook. And he is a fighter where if the fight gets to the third round, I think that's where Ogden is really going to, take over in this fight. But the power, the physicality, the takedowns are better from Radzhabov. I think the jiu-jitsu is probably better from Ogden, but the top pressure and the takedowns are probably going to be easier to get for Radzhabov than they are for Ogden. I think Ogden's only real path in this fight is to start to slow down Radzhabov and work from the outside, constantly be on your bicycle, jab, check hook, 1-2 down the middle, try to catch Radzhabov coming in, and then just really break him down over 15 minutes. Maybe get a finish in the third round. I think that's something that's possible for Ogden in this spot because we know Radzhabov's going to slow down, but he did get that knockout in the third round against El-Sawadi, who, it was a close and competitive fight, but it looked like it was going in the direction of El-Sawadi before that big bomb landed for Radzhabov. I think this fight is pretty much 50-50. I think the more physical fighter is Radzhabov. The fighter with better top control, I think, is Radzhabov. I think the better fighter in terms of cardio over 15 minutes is Ogden. I think the fighter with the better output over 15 minutes is Trey Ogden. It's going to be a case of forward pressure, physicality, and power. going up against technicality, footwork, movement, and usage of your jab in the lead hand. And that's pretty much exactly how you break the fight down. I think this fight comes down to who can use their wrestling and who uses it better. I think Radzhabov is probably going to be the one who gets takedowns if there are takedowns in this spot or in this fight. This fight reeks of split decision to me. I think it probably ends by split. I think in most cases, if it's not a finish, Trey Ogden wins round 3. So it really comes down to how you're going to score the first 2 rounds. I think Radzhabov at least gets 1 round. I think he hurts Ogden at a point, but Ogden survives. And I don't really know who I want to pick in this spot. I think the bigger moments are going to come from Radzhabov, but I think he's going to slow down so much that even the lighter punches from Ogden are going to look much bigger and look like they're going to have a much bigger effect than they do. I'm going to go with Trey Ogden here. I'll go with Ogden by decision. I think he wins 29-28 split decision. Again, not a fight I would bet on, not a fight I love betting on, and not a fight I would advocate you to bet on either. I just think that he probably can win heavier in the 3rd round, and if the first 2 rounds are close, they might sway it towards Ogden, but the bigger shots are probably going to come from Radzhabov. Yeah, I like Ogden in this fight. I think Ogden wins 29-28 split decision. Close fight, but I like his cardio and his overall game planning more than I like Radzhabov over 15 minutes. All right, and the next fight up is in the women's flyweight division between Miranda Fear the Maverick taking on Dione the Witch Barbosa. This is another one where I was actually very surprised at the betting line, but then going back and watching Barbosa versus Carrasqueta, I think it makes sense, but I do not think there's a world where Miranda Maverick should be a 2-1 favorite against anybody unless your name's Priscilla Cachoeira. I don't think Miranda Maverick ever covers a 2-1 price tag. Ever. No matter what the fight is. So I think the odds are off. I think this fight should be more of a pick'em. I think they're getting this idea because of the way that the fight against Carrasqueta played out. I picked Ernesto Carrasqueta to beat Dione Barbosa by late TKO or via decision. It looked like it was going that way. I thought we were going to get a TKO in the 3rd round because Barbosa was slowing down a lot, but she survived and she still won via split decision, I believe. I think it might have been unanimous, but it should have been a split, and it could have easily gone to Carrasqueta's way. This fight plays out in the fact of Miranda Maverick's the better striker. She uses her kicks better from the outside. She throws decent 1-2s. She moves well on her feet. She can move her head well. But this comes down to wrestling versus jiu-jitsu. Will the wrestling of Miranda Maverick be able to control the positions of Dione Barbosa? Or will Barbosa be able to find her way to good positions, take the back of Miranda Maverick, look for submissions and find a way to submit Miranda Maverick? If you look at Miranda Maverick's overall record, she is 13-5. She has never lost by submission. She has 8 finishes, 5 decisions. 7 of the wins come by way of submission. Dione Barbosa is 13-5. Or I'm sorry, 7-2. I'm sorry, I was looking at Miranda Maverick's record. And 3 of her wins come by submission and 4 by decision. She has no wins by knockout. And she's lost 1 time by TKO. That was up against Josiane Nunes at Katana Fight. And Josiane Nunes is a pretty solid fighter in terms of her UFC career. She lost her last fight to Chelsea Chandler, which didn't look great, but got a decision win over Zara Farin, and then another decision over Ramona Pascual, an overhand knockout over Bia Malecki. So she's 3-1 in the UFC. So she's been able to compete in the UFC, even though it's at a lower level of competition than the highest level of the division. I think Dione Barbosa's live in this fight. I'll tell you that right now. I think the better striker is Miranda Maverick, but I think the scrambles and the positional awareness, there can be a point where Dione Barbosa gets the back of Miranda Maverick. She finds a way to jump off and take an arm and go for a submission. She finds a way to grab a neck and go for a guillotine. She's very solid on the ground. She chains her submission attempts together. She goes from triangle to armbar, etc. The better cardio is going to be Miranda Maverick, but here's the thing. Maverick always fights close with most of her opponents, to the point where a lot of these fights could be split. They could be a split decision. I don't love what I saw from Deone Barbosa in her last fight. There's a reason I picked Carrasqueta, but Miranda Maverick is not the level of striker that Ernesto Carrasqueta is, so I don't think that there's as much of a danger factor on the feet for Deone Barbosa in this fight as there was in the last fight. I think Maverick's a better wrestler and grappler, so it's going to be harder for Barbosa to get those positions on the mat, and she might concede a lot of top control time, if Miranda Maverick shoots takedowns and gets the top position, and I think that's something that's possible, but I'm not going to pick Miranda Maverick here. I originally was going with Deone Barbosa. I was going with the Witch, and I'm going to go with Deone Barbosa. That's going to be my pick. She's a plus 190 underdog. I don't love the bet. I don't love betting women's MMA either, but I do think there's value on Deone Barbosa against Miranda Maverick. I don't think Miranda Maverick's a bad fighter. She has the UFC level experience, which is a big deal in most cases, but I think the scrambling ability, I think the ability to threaten with submissions could also look very good to the judges, where maybe she gets an armbar, it's very close. She gets a triangle, it's really close, but Maverick is able to get her way out. Maybe she goes for a leg lock and is able to survive, but she cranks on it. I think the bigger moments in the grappling are going to come from Deone Barbosa, and I think there is the possibility that Barbosa gets a submission. She's never been submitted, has Miranda Maverick, but I don't think she's ever faced anybody with the jiu-jitsu level of Barbosa on the mat. She chains positions together, or chains submissions together. She floats from position to position. She's very active off of her back. She's going to look for submissions. She's going to look for sweeps, and I think the activity on the mat, where I believe most of this fight probably takes place, is going to come from Deone Barbosa, while I believe Miranda Maverick is the better striker. So I think there's value on Barbosa. I wouldn't play a sub line. I would just play the money line because I think plus 190 is a decent odd. But I'm going to go with Deone the Witch Barbosa to win 29-28 unanimous decision, potentially a submission. But I like the value on the dog here with her activity off of her back. Not a great performance in her last fight, but like I said, I think Carrasqueta is much better on the feet than Miranda Maverick is. So give me Deone Barbosa via decision, 29-28. All right, next fight up is in the bantamweight division. You have Brian Boom Kelleher, who comes in with a record of 24-15, taking on the 20-10 Cody Gibson. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I'm going Cody Gibson, man. I think his pace, his boxing, his cardio, his forward pressure is going to be way too much for a guy in Brian Kelleher, who I believe kind of has one foot out the door at this point in his MMA career. Not ashamed to get knocked out by Cody Garbrandt when Garbrandt's on. He's one of the best in the division. But Brian Kelleher is not going to be able to compete on the feet with Cody Gibson in terms of his durability, in terms of his output, in terms of his volume, in terms of his overall boxing combinations. I mean, go back and watch the Brad Katona fight. Go back and watch the Miles Johns fight. I mean, if Johns didn't get those takedowns, I believe Cody Gibson probably would have TKO'd him on the feet. It looked like it was going in the way of Cody Gibson to win via late round TKO, because whenever the fight was on the feet, he was pushing forward, throwing the 1-2, throwing the double jab, and putting his combinations together. He just couldn't really stuff the wrestling and the takedowns of Miles Johns. And then he was also getting hit with some pretty big shots. Brian Kelleher can get a submission. Maybe if, Gibson shoots a bad takedown, puts his neck out there, maybe he gets caught in a guillotine. But aside from a Hail Mary submission, kind of like Julian Erosa fight, I don't think Brian Kelleher wins this fight. Gibson's a veteran. Gibson looked amazing in that fight against Brad Katona. It was back and forth, but Katona took over late. Gibson is going to slow down the later the fight goes. But at the same time, I kind of just think he's better than Kelleher everywhere, aside from if he leaves his neck out there and gets caught in a submission. I think Gibson probably wins this fight via a late TKO. I would probably go Cody Gibson round 2, round 3 TKO. I think his jab, his 1-2, ripping the body, finishing combinations with kicks, he's much better than Kelleher on the feet. Yes, Kelleher has a good left hook. He can land on your chin. He can knock you out. He's looked good in other fights, but at this point in his career, I just think he kind of has one foot out the door. Maybe he grabs the neck, like I said. Maybe he lands a left hook and clips Cody Gibson on the feet. But Gibson's not an easy guy to put away, and even if you hurt him, he's still going to find a way to come back. So I like Cody Gibson to outstrike Brian Kelleher, avoid the submission attempts, outpace him, outvolume him, and probably get a late finish. I'm going to go Cody Gibson, 3rd round TKO over Brian Kelleher. There's just no way I could pick Kelleher at this point in his MMA career. Yes, he has more UFC experience, but I think Gibson's the better fighter. I think Gibson has the better range, the better reach, the better long punches. The straight punches in the boxing of Cody Gibson are going to be too much for Brian Kelleher over 15 minutes, and he's going to outpace him and piece him up down the stretch. Cody Gibson, round 3 TKO is my official pick for this fight. All right, next fight up is in the featherweight division. One of the best fights on the card in terms of a pure matchup between Jung Young Lee taking on Haider Emil. Haider the Hurricane Emil, 9-0, undefeated, 11-1 for Jung Young Lee. The Tiger, what is his nickname? Tiger something? Let me see. What is his nickname? It's like Tiger Prince or something Tiger. The Korean Tiger. Okay, I was wrong. So the Korean Tiger, Jung Young Lee, taking on Haider the Hurricane Emil. Good nicknames. When I break this fight down, honestly, after watching tape, I think this fight's pretty close, man. I really do. I think this is another fight that is kind of a coin flip in terms of how it plays out. You know, the better long-range punches and long-range attacks are going to come from Jung Young Lee. Go back and watch his Blake Builder fight. Go back and watch his fight from Road to UFC against Ji Young, I believe, or I believe that was the name. I could be wrong pronouncing it or whatever. Forgive me, correct me in the comments if you want. But Jung Young Lee has good 1-2s down the middle. He moves good laterally. He's got really good takedown defense. Even if he gets taken down, he can get held down for a little bit, but he works his way back up. I think the power advantage in this fight goes to Haider Emil. Jung Young Lee works the body very well. He can finish his combinations with kicks. He throws his jab. He throws a 1-1-2, moves pretty well. Against Blake Builder, he looked great. He pretty much dominated the entire fight. He gave up, I think, 1 or 2 takedowns, but for the most part, he was the one who was able to reverse position. He was the one who was able to get on top against Blake Builder, who is a CFFC champion. You know, he's not a bum, and he competed on the Contender Series, got a first-round submission. I was pretty high on Blake Builder in that fight, and Jung Young Lee just shut him down. He pretty much shut him down and said, like, hey, this is how this is going to go, and you can't really do too much about it. Haider Emil is going to be more powerful. He fights out of that southpaw stance, straight left down the middle, right hook, uses that outside low kick to circle out. He can also get takedowns and wrestle. The power advantage, I believe, is on the Haider Emil side. I think the speed advantage is on the Jung Young Lee side. I do believe that Haider Emil, coming in as like a 2-1 underdog, I think there's value on Emil. But at the same time, I kind of think that this fight, like I said, this is a very hard fight to predict. Watching the tape on both guys, they both have areas where I think they can improve. And, I mean, the win over Blake Builder is a pretty big win for Jung Young Lee. But we haven't seen much of him in the UFC. Haider Emil beats Fernie Garcia. Fernie Garcia, you know, he's not the best. And he put himself into some pretty compromising positions in that spot against, against Fernie Garcia. Even though he still found a way to win, he got his back taken, he got put in a rear naked choke, but he was able to survive it. Fernie Garcia is 10-5, but in the UFC, he's lost 4 fights in a row. So he lost a decision to Journey Newsom, a decision to Brady Highstand, a decision to Rinya Nakamura, and a TKO in round 2 to Haider Emil. Haider Emil is the only person who was able to finish him inside the UFC. So give credit where credit is due. But Fernie Garcia is not the highest level of competition. Jung Young Lee, on the other hand, beats a CFFC champion who looked good against Shane Young, but didn't really look that great in terms of, you know, the UFC career thus far. He also lost a unanimous decision to Kyle Nelson, and he looked terrible in that fight, but look at how good Nelson has looked in his UFC career, continually being counted out as an underdog and finding a way to come through. Got that first round rear naked choke submission against Alex Morgan, and then he comes in and gets the decision over Shane Young, but Shane Young 13-8. So thinking about this from a stylistic perspective, the fighter who's fought the better competition is Jung Young Lee. But at the same time, I don't think the competition level is crazy for Jung Young Lee. I think this fight is basically a pick-em. I think the faster fighter's Jung Young Lee. He has good boxing combinations. He rips the body very well. He can go with a right uppercut or a right hook to the body. He can throw that left uppercut or left hook to the body. He can even time your level change with shots to the body and kind of cut you off from getting takedowns. I think the strength of Haider Emil is going to be very imperative in this fight. The physicality, the strength, and the power. But at the same time, the takedown defense of Jung Young Lee is very good. He's able to stuff takedowns. He's able to work off the fence. He's able to get back up to his feet and get back to range. Man, this is a hard one to pick, guys. Hard one to pick. And I don't know, man. This is a coin flip for me. I know a lot of people are very heavy on Jung Young Lee, but I think Haider Emil can come in here and cause a lot of problems with his power, strength, and physicality. I know Emil's undefeated 9-0, 11-1 though for Jung Young Lee. So the records combined are 20-1. Let me think. Give me a second. I got to think this one through because I don't know who I want to pick really. I'm going to go Jung Young Lee. He was my original lean. Well, no, I originally actually was going to pick Haider Emil. Hold on. Give me a second. Let me think. Guys, this is really hard. Really hard to make a pick here. This is 50-50 in my opinion, based on the way that each of these guys fight. I'm going Haider Emil. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think he can do some damage. I think he hits harder. I think he's more physical than Jung Young Lee, and I think he's going to cause more damage over the 15 minutes. I think Jung Young Lee is fast. He's faster. He puts his combinations together well. He can grapple, but I think Haider Emil finds a way to get this done. I think he outdogs Jung Young Lee and just finds a way to win down the stretch and pushes a higher pace. Give me Haider Emil to win via decision, maybe a late TKO, but I'll go Haider the Hurricane Emil, 29-28 unanimous decision here. All right, guys, next fight up. Hopefully it's a little bit easier to break down, but it's not really. This is another tough one in the flyweight division between Cody Durden and Bruno Silva, not the man who faced Alex Pereira. 13-5-2-1 for Bruno Silva, including 1 no contest and 2 draws. 16-5 with 1 draw or 1 no contest for Cody Durden. Listen, I faded Cody Durden in almost every single one of his UFC fights, and then I picked him in the fight against Tagir Ulanbekov. I finally said, you know what? I'm finally going to go with him because he proves me wrong every time, and what do you know? He gets submitted with a rear naked choke, which is something I've called his submission vulnerability, is something we've talked about multiple times, and that's it. He loses. So the one time I pick Cody Durden, he loses, which tells you one thing. I can't break down Cody Durden fights. I'm 100% being honest with you guys. I don't know how he wins the fights that he wins, and then the ones I pick him in, he loses. Got submitted with a flying triangle in the first round against Jimmy Flick. Jimmy Flick is terrible. He's terrible. No disrespect to him as a person. You know, he got in the cage. He's better than me, but I cannot decide Cody Durden's fights. He uses a good jab. He throws decent 1-2s. He's trained with Alexandre Pantoja, the flyweight champion. You know, heavy wrestling pace and pressure. Not a really good striker, but the striking's getting better. Throws decent kicks, but it's really big overhands, 1-2s down the middle, decent lateral movement, and then trying to get in on your hips, get takedowns, outdog you, you know, like a dog on the bone, get the takedowns, and just rinse and repeat over and over and over again. I think Bruno Silva's the much better striker. He puts his combinations together well. He throws good low kicks, fires 1-2s down the middle, can throw knees up the middle as well. He got a submission victory over Tyson Nam, but Nam is not the best grappler, so I don't think that's a great thing to look at going into this fight. Durden's ranked 14 in the division. Silva's not ranked yet. 5-4 for Silva, 5-7 for Durden. 2-inch reach advantage for Cody Durden, but on the feet, he's at a disadvantage against Silva. Silva puts his combos together well. He throws good leg kicks. If you look at the grappling, he has a 64% takedown defense rate, while Cody Durden has a 50% takedown accuracy. So pretty much 1 out of every 2 takedowns Durden is getting. He's going to be the better wrestler, but he has to watch out for the submissions of Bruno Silva, but he's had to deal with submission vulnerability throughout his entire UFC career. He's been put in bad positions with submissions, and sometimes he gets finished. Sometimes he finds a way to get his way out. Durden is never going to stop moving forward. He's never going to stop going for takedowns. He'll put himself in bad positions just to get you on the mat and hope that he can defend your guillotine, hope that he can, defend you taking his back and locking in a rear naked choke, and then winding up on top and landing ground and pound and trying to overwhelm you and win based on takedowns and top control time. That's how Cody Durden wins. Heavy pressure, takedowns, and top control time. He's not going to win with knockouts. Yes, he has gotten a KO in his UFC career before, but Bruno Silva's the better striker. Bruno Silva can also use submissions as well. He can go for submissions off of his back. He can go for submissions from the top. Again, this is another fight where I said going into this fight card, this is a very hard fight card to break down. And this is just another fight that's very, very difficult to break down. Cody Durden and Bruno Silva, man. It's extremely hard to pick a winner in this fight. I think Durden is going to have the better cardio over 15 minutes. And I think Durden is a fighter who is going to be able to push the pace at a higher level than Bruno Silva. I think he probably, wins the third round in most cases, but I think Silva's much better on the feet. I think Silva lands much better combinations. Let's look at Bruno Silva's last fight. 13-5. He's got 1 loss by submission, 3 by decision, and 1 by TKO. But he's got a rear naked choke win over Tyson Nam, first round KO over Victor Rodriguez, and then a counter shot against JP Buys, which isn't the greatest, because JP Buys is not the greatest fighter. He's actually pretty terrible, at least in terms of his UFC career. He's 9-6, got 1 win, and it was on the Contender Series. After that, no wins in the UFC. Knockout to loss to Bruno Silva. Went to decision with Montel Jackson, which looks pretty good, but still lost unanimous decision. Got knocked out by Cody Durden. I said Cody Durden had a knockout in his UFC career, right? There it is. He knocked him out right there. But JP Buys got knocked out by Bruno Silva as well. And then he loses via first round knockout to Marcus McGee. McGee also had that knockout win against Gaston Bolaños, the Dream Killer. I think Bruno Silva is going to win this fight. I would not be surprised if the forward pressure and the wrestling of Durden gets to Bruno Silva. He's able to control him. He's able to overwhelm him. He's able to, find a way to win this fight. Would it surprise me? No. But I've picked against Cody Durden so many times. And, the one time I pick him, he loses. You can't really pick with emotion here. This is a fight I would stay away from, betting-wise, 100%. I don't like it. I don't like it at all, because I think Durden is live to get in the face of Bruno Silva, crowd him, overwhelm him, and continue to take him down. But, Silva is no slouch. I mean, he's not an easy out. He's a much better striker than Cody Durden. He throws with much better technique and much better intent on the feet. He lost a unanimous decision to Tagir Ulanbekov. Cody Durden got finished by Ulanbekov with a rear naked choke. He lost a decision to David Dvorak. But I think Bruno Silva's a better fighter all around than Cody Durden. I think he lands better shots on the feet. I think he throws up submissions on the ground, which kind of makes Durden a little bit hesitant with the wrestling. He's going to push that wrestling pace, but he might also put himself into bad positions and leave his neck out there to get caught and get submitted, like we've seen before from Cody Durden. I'm going to go Bruno Silva. I'm going to go Bruno Silva by submission. I'm going to go Bruno Silva second round guillotine choke submission. It could easily be a decision, though. It's not something I'd bank on for a finish. I think he could get a TKO because I think he's the better striker. But yeah, I like Bruno Silva. I like Bruno Silva by submission in this fight. So that's going to be the pick. Bruno Silva, late second round guillotine choke submission. Next up on the chopping block in the featherweight division, we have the Korean Superboy Doo-Ho Choi coming in with a record of 14-4-1, taking on Bill El Senor Perfecto Algeo, who comes back with a record of 18 victories and 8 defeats. Another fight that's just really difficult to predict, man. A lot of very close matchups on the card, but we've said that so many times. I don't want to keep repeating myself, but it's just the way the card is. Both of these guys have faced off with Kyle Nelson. Doo-Ho Choi ended up losing that fight via draw, when technically he probably should have won that fight due to the wrestling, due to the takedowns, and due to the striking on the feet. I think he won that fight, but he got a point deduction due to an unintentional headbutt, but they said it was intentional, and it went to a draw. Bill Algeo got finished by Kyle Nelson on the feet. One of the only people, I believe, in Kyle Nelson's career that he was able to finish off. Let's check really quick. I just want to make sure. Bill Algeo, 18-8. He has only been finished once via TKO, and that was in round 1, and it was right at the end of round 1 too, so pretty crazy. 16-5-1 was the record for Kyle Nelson. He has 6 wins by TKO, 4 submissions, so 10 out of 16 wins come by way of finish, but usually Kyle Nelson is going to decision. That's just the way that he fights. Very technical, very long, very rangy, and again, fought to a close fight with Doo-Ho Choi. I worry about the fact that Kyle Nelson was able to knock out Algeo, even though it was a standing TKO. I mean, he hurt him over and over and over again, and it was due to that hands-low style. I think Bill Algeo only finds success because of that hands-low style, and I almost feel like he's going to be a little bit gun-shy and fight different from how he normally fights in this fight, which I believe is going to open up the overall game of Doo-Ho Choi. Doo-Ho Choi, however, hasn't been that consistent in his MMA career, especially inside the UFC. He had to do his mandatory Korean military service, 14-4-1, but the last time we saw him in the cage was December 21st, 2019, and then after that, we haven't seen him back. Well, we saw him back in February 4th of 2023, where it was the majority draw against Kyle Nelson. But the last time he was in the cage prior to that was, like we said, 2019. So he's been gone. He's pretty much fought one time in the last 5 years. It was a decent performance. He looked pretty good. Before that, he got TKO'd by Charles Jourdain, which doesn't look very good because we know how inconsistent Jourdain is. Before that, he got knocked out by Jeremy Stevens. Then he lost a unanimous decision to Cub Swanson, but that was one of the craziest fights you'll ever see back at UFC 206. So we have an inconsistent fighter, some due to his own doing and some out of his control, like the military service, going up against a guy in Algeo who is very good. He's light on the feet. He fights in that karate stance. He's in and out. Doo-Ho Choi can wrestle. He can grapple. He can throw kicks, but he's mainly boxing heavy approach and boxing heavy style. 1-2 down the middle, cross hook, hook cross. He's going to be looking to take Bill Algeo's head off. And Algeo can be hit. I mean, we saw him get hit on the feet, hurt, and TKO'd by the likes of Kyle Nelson, which, like we said, he hadn't had a TKO victory, or he hadn't been TKO'd until that Kyle Nelson TKO. So, you know, not the greatest look for Algeo. And he's won some other fights. He's fought very close in other fights. Doo-Ho Choi is a finisher. He gets a lot of KOs. He throws with a lot of power when it comes to his boxing combinations. But out of his 14 wins, he has 12 finishes, 2 wins by decision. I think the power and the speed of his punches can give Algeo some trouble. I mean, the fact that Algeo got TKO'd by Kyle Nelson, it's not a great look. And that's what's pushing me towards the way of the Korean Superboy, Doo-Ho Choi. Now, when you look at a guy like Algeo, like I said, light on the feet, side stance, in and out, susceptible to leg kicks. He can get his wrestling going as well. He hurt TJ Brown on the feet, hurt him bad, and ended up getting a submission. He's got 7 wins out of his 18 wins coming by way of sub, 4 by way of TKO. So 11 out of his 18 wins are coming by way of finish, but he does have the submissions in his back pocket. 7 wins by decision, only been submitted twice, lost by TKO once. So out of 25 fights, he's been finished in only 3 out of those 25. So a lot of the times Algeo is either the one doing the finishing or he's going to a decision, whether it's at a win or a loss. He's 2-3 in his last 5 fights, The Andre Fili fight, I felt like Bill Algeo did enough to win. It was very close. He got the rear naked choke submission over TJ Brown. Comes in. Actually, wait, that's not. One of them was a grappling match. So he's actually 2-2 in his last 4, 3-2 in his last 5. He got that TKO due to exhaustion against Herbert Burns. He won a unanimous decision over Joe Anderson Brito, which looks very good at this point. Lost a split decision to Andre Fili. He could have won that one, and then beat Alexander Hernandez by decision, and then lost to Kyle Nelson in his last fight. He arguably could be 4-1 in his last 5 because you can't count the grappling match. And Algeo is a very solid fighter. It's just like I said, sometimes he fights to a very close decision, or the way he fights looks pretty close, but he tends to pull away down the stretch. I think Doo Ho Choi, the inconsistency in terms of his overall career due to the military service and other reasons, makes me have some concerns. But I mean, prior to his losing streak, he was on a winning streak of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. He was 16-1 going into the fight against Cub Swanson. Then he lost that fight to Swanson, and since then he's gone 0-3. So he went 0-3 on his losses. Loss, and loss. And then the Kyle Nelson fight was a draw, but he should have won it. So he should be 1-3 in his last 4, but that was after coming in and being, you know, an unstoppable force, so to speak, except for the one loss all the way back in June of 2010 in Deep MMA to Yusuke Kajiyama. So I think Doo Ho Choi is more powerful. I think he's more dangerous. But the fact that Doo Ho Choi got knocked out by Charles Jourdain, I don't love that. Jourdain throws with decent power, but he's not really a power striker. I think Algeo's tricky. You know, he's light on the feet. But I think the sharper fighter over 15 minutes is Doo Ho Choi. I think this is a winnable fight for Algeo if he stays on the outside, finds his counters, lands knees up the middle. He's very good up the center channel with uppercuts, knees. He can throw head kicks, and Doo Ho Choi can be finished. I mean, getting TKO'd by Jourdain isn't the greatest, but getting TKO'd by Kyle Nelson isn't the greatest either. But Nelson is on the up and up and on the upward trajectory of his career. Just based off how brutal that KO was against Kyle Nelson, and the fact that Nelson doesn't really knock people out, especially in the UFC, I'm going to go with Doo Ho Choi. I don't love the pick. I'm not extremely confident in that pick either, but I think Doo Ho Choi can get it done here. I think he has the technicality, the speed, and the power in his boxing, and he can wrestle. He's not really known for his grappling, but he was able to out-grapple Kyle Nelson in multiple positions in that fight, and that's something that a pretty high-level grappler in Blake Builder wasn't really able to do. And you know, Kyle Nelson was able to compete with Fernando Padilla on the feet, and I'm pretty high on Padilla in terms of his overall striking game when it comes to MMA. So I'm gonna go with the Korean Superboy. I'm gonna go with Doo Ho Choi. I don't love it based on the inactivity, but I think he has the skill set to be able to beat a guy like Algeo, who's coming off a TKO to a guy who's not really known as a knockout artist. So give me Doo Ho Choi to win this fight by knockout. I'm going to go the Korean Superboy Doo Ho Choi via second round TKO over Bill Algeo. But again, another really, really tough fight to call. This might be one of the hardest fight cards to break down in the last year. Up next, we've got a battle in the lightweight division between the former Ultimate Fighter winner in Kurt Holobaugh taking on a guy coming off the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series, coming off a brutal knockout loss to Elves Brenner in his last fight in Kanan Khrushchevsky. I believe it's Kanan Khrushchevsky. And yeah, man, this fight, again, is, do you go with the veteran or do you go with the newcomer? But the newcomer is coming off a brutal loss. If you go back and you look at Kanan Khrushchevsky's last fight, or one of his fights on the regional scene, I should say, he got knocked out brutally with an overhand right on the regional scene. And in the UFC, he got knocked out with an overhand left. It was a switch stance from orthodox to southpaw, a la Dustin Poirier, and he got hit pretty much the exact same way and face planted right on the mat. So the knockout losses for Khrushchevsky, he's only lost by knockout. He's kill or be killed. He comes forward. He goes for the kill. But if you go and you look at that last fight with Elves Brenner, he did come into that fight out of shape. He was a little bit heavier, a little bit, flabby. And if you look at his social media, he is full six-pack, ready to go, back in shape, and taking this fight very seriously. Kurt Holloway is a guy who I picked to win on The Ultimate Fighter, and I also picked him to, what was I going to say? I picked him to beat Trey Ogden. I thought the boxing, the body work, the forward pressure, and the jiu-jitsu was going to be troublesome for Trey Ogden. There were points in that fight where Holloway was able to push Ogden up against the cage and try to unload with some combinations and put his shots together, but he got taken down and he got controlled. This is a fight where I don't think Krzyzewski's going to be looking for takedowns, and I think Kurt Holloway is going to be willing to stand on the feet and strike with Krzyzewski. We've seen Krzyzewski get KO'd violently. Like I said, his losses are via violent KO. And with Kurt Holloway, let me check really quick. I don't believe Holloway's been finished in a very long time. Let's see. He's got 8 losses, only 1 loss by KO. So out of 28 fights, he's been KO'd once. He has 7 wins by KO and 10 wins by submission. So 17 finishes out of 20 wins, only been finished twice out of his 8 losses. He's got 3 wins by decision, but 6 losses by decision. He lost to Trey Ogden, but before that, he went on a 5-fight win streak. That's including the Ultimate Fighter. And then there was 1 grappling match, but his losses were to Shane Burgos, Thiago Moises, and Raoni Barcelos. Those are not bad losses at all. Barcelos is kind of hot and cold. He looks real good, sometimes looks real bad, other times. Shane Burgos, again, kind of hot and cold, but he's not a bad fighter at all. Like, Burgos is pretty high level and pretty good technically. And Thiago Moises, I mean, he's a very solid grappler. He goes for takedowns, and, you know, he's going to look to strike with you on the feet, too, if he's able to have some prolonged success. Before those losses in the UFC, he had a win over Jay-Z Cavalcante, Yostenis Cedeno, and then Luciano Dos Santos. So, you know, not the craziest wins. The Jay-Z Cavalcante one was pretty good. That was back in 2017. But again, this fight is pretty volatile because I think the more technical striker is Kurt Holloway, but I think the power of Krzyzewski is what makes the difference. He has a beautiful left hook, 1-2s down the middle. I mean, if this guy connects on your chin, he can put you to sleep easily. Holloway's going to be the better grappler, the fighter with better jiu-jitsu, but at the same time, I think that Krzyzewski can, you know, hang on the ground as well. He's got 9 wins by submission, 4 by TKO. You know, only winning by decision 2 times. So out of 15 wins, he's got 13 finishes, and most of them come via submission. He's got, let's see, a rear naked choke, a guillotine choke, let's see, another rear naked choke, and a few other ones that aren't listed. I don't think Krzyzewski has fought the highest level of competition. Before the Elves Brenner fight, his last loss came in 2019, and he went on a 6-fight win streak, including the win on Contender Series, where he got a rear naked choke in round 1 against Dylan Mantello. Mantello currently sits at 8-3, and let's see if he's done anything since the Contender Series. He actually came back and got a win over Nate Williams back in February of this year. Nate Williams is 7-3. Nasty Nate Williams. I don't know who that is. I've never seen him compete, I don't believe. Let me see. No, I haven't seen him compete. But, you know, 15-14 in Nate Williams' overall pro MMA record. So if you're 15-14, you should have quit a long time ago. So that's not a great win for Dylan Mantello. It's a pretty easy gimme fight, I guess you could say. So in this fight, I think it comes down to, I believe the more technical striker is Kurt Holloway, but I think the more powerful striker and the fighter who has the finishing upside is Krzyzewski. But I also think Krzyzewski is coming into this fight and he's kill or be killed. Both losses by KO, but he comes in and swings for the finish. I'm going to go with Kenan Krzyzewski here to get a KO. I think he's going to knock out Kurt Holloway. I like Kurt Holloway as a fighter. I think he has good boxing. I think he works the body well, comes up top well. He's only been knocked out once, but I think if there is a fighter who can KO him, I think it would probably be a fighter like Krzyzewski. He got clipped with the boxing of Raoni Barcelos. I think Barcelos is more technical, but I think Krzyzewski's coming into this fight ready to go. I think he's coming into this fight motivated, and I also think Holloway can hit him with some body shots, come up top and hurt him and knock him out as well for the reasons we've already touched on. But I like Kenan Krzyzewski here. I wouldn't be surprised if the veteran was able to find a way to win, but based on the fact that Krzyzewski also can go for submissions, and Holloway, although he does have good grappling, he can get controlled if you have good top pressure and good top position, and I think Krzyzewski can compete on the floor if they get into a grappling match, and I think he has much more power in terms of the striking on the feet. So I'm going to take Kenan Krzyzewski to get the job done over Kurt Holloway. I'll go with a first round knockout. We'll go second round. I'll play it safe. Maybe he survives the first round. I'll go second round knockout for Krzyzewski. I could see a submission because, like I said, Holloway has good jiu-jitsu, good submissions. He can chain from armbar to triangle very well. But Austin Hubbard isn't the greatest mixed martial artist ever. Even before he was on The Ultimate Fighter, he didn't have the most success. So that's not the greatest win for a guy like Holloway. But I'll take Krzyzewski by knockout. We'll go second round KO. I think he's coming into this fight rejuvenated. I think he's coming into this fight ready, prepared, and he looks in much better shape than his last time out. So give me Krzyzewski, second round knockout over Kurt Holloway. All right, next fight up is in the featherweight division, the featured bout of the evening between Steve Garcia, the Mean Machine, 15-5, taking on Sang-Woo Choi, who comes in with a record of, I believe it's 13-6? Oh, 11-6. So 15-5 versus 11-6. I think that this fight is going to be close, but I heavily lean Steve Garcia. I just worry about his durability, man. I know he survived and then TKO'd Shailon Nurmabeka as a decent-sized underdog, but again, he got clipped real hard and was able to come back, and I think that was more due to the fact that Shailon couldn't follow up the way that he wanted to. Against Melquiazel Costa, he got his back taken, got controlled up against the cage. He was able to put one hook in, but then Steve Garcia came out in the second round and came out like a bat out of hell and just immediately started throwing his combinations. He's a southpaw. Sang-Woo Choi's an orthodox fighter. Sang-Woo Choi, he's got 11 wins. 6 of them come by KO. So he's more than likely going to be looking for the finish, and he's going to be looking to get that finish with his boxing combinations. He won his last fight over Jarno Aarons. Before that, he got knocked out by Michael Trezano, and he lost a split decision to Josh Kulabau, then got submitted by Alex Bruce Leroy Caceres. He did knock out Julian Erosa, which looks better and better. He got a unanimous decision win over Yusuf Zalal. Zalal came in and finished Billy Quarantillo in his return to the UFC. So this guy hasn't had the worst career. Sang-Woo Choi doesn't have the worst career, but he leaves himself open way too much for my liking against a fighter who pushes forward and goes for the kill like Steve Garcia. Garcia can be clipped as well. I mean, if Sang-Woo Choi clipped Garcia with a left hook and knocked him out, wouldn't surprise me. If he clipped him with a right hand as he closed the distance, it wouldn't shock me. I think this fight ends by knockout. I think it's either Sang-Woo Choi landing a big left hook and knocking out Steve Garcia as he closes the distance, or I think it's Steve Garcia getting in the face of Sang-Woo Choi, finding that straight left down the middle, working the body, ripping to the body, and then coming back up top and breaking Sang-Woo Choi. I'm going to go with the momentum, and I'm going to go with Steve Garcia. I think Garcia is like his nickname says, the Mean Machine. This guy just pushes forward and keeps on coming forward until he gets you out of there. I mean, there were points where he could have quit against Nurmabeka. He didn't. There were points where he could have quit against Melquiazel Costa, but he defended, and the minute that second round started, he came out like a bat out of hell and looked for the kill immediately. I mean, they started it off round 2, and boom, he was immediately in his face. Left hand to the body, left hand up top, right hook, jumped on him on the ground, looked for a submission, didn't get it, vicious ground and pound elbows, and just put it on him and put him out of his misery. After that, he won. He also knocked out Chase Hooper. I don't think the Chase Hooper fight looked that good before, but now the fact that Chase Hooper technically should have got a TKO over Vyacheslav Borshev, but, they let him take a prolonged beating, and then eventually he got the submission the longer the fight went. Chase Hooper's improving. But at that point, Hooper wasn't used to the striking, so he didn't get it done. His last loss came to Maheshate, at least when it comes to Steve Garcia. He got KO'd in the first round with a beautiful counter right hand as he walked into range and got clipped. It was the same shot that Nurmagomedov caught him with. He came into range, boom, right hand right down the middle. Sang Woo Choi has a great straight right hand, but he leaves himself open, as does Garcia, but I think Garcia is better at finding positions to win. I think he's a little bit hungrier than Sang Woo Choi, and I think that's what makes the difference. I think Garcia can be hit, he can be clipped. Both of these guys are defensive liabilities in terms of, how they fight, but I think Steve Garcia is better defensively than Sang Woo Choi. Would it surprise me if Choi caught him with a right hand as he closed the distance and knocked him out? No. But I think Garcia weathers a storm, starts to put the pressure on, and starts to break Sang Woo Choi in that second round. And I think he hurts him, drops him, jumps on him, and gets another vicious ground and pound TKO. I'm going the Mean Machine. I'm going Steve Garcia to get the job done here. Second round knockout. I think a good bet for this fight would be fight ends by knockout or the under 2.5. I think somebody's getting finished. Steve Garcia is kill or be killed. He comes in on his shield and he goes out on his shield. Whether it's a win or a loss, he doesn't care. He comes in and gets the job done. I think the forward pressure, the aggression, and the will to win from Steve Garcia is too much for the technical striker in Sang Woo Choi, who is very good, who is very crisp, is very clean, but he's way too open defensively, and I think he gets hurt by Steve Garcia, and Garcia doesn't allow him to recover. Give me the Mean Machine, Steve Garcia, to defeat Sang Woo Choi, second round TKO in this fight. All right, we're at the co-main event of the evening in the middleweight division between Brad Tavares and the Iron Turtle in Jun Young Park. 17-5 for Jun Young Park, 20-10 for Brad Tavares. I think this fight really comes down to the use of the jab from Jun Young Park and the takedown defense of Brad Tavares. Jun Young Park is a decent striker. He knocked out, he submitted Albert Duraev, but he technically knocked him out. I mean, he was knocked out. He landed a beautiful overhand elbow and then a left hook. A right elbow over the top into the left hook. That's a beautiful combo. Bring him one way, send him back the other. And he sent his chin back in the direction of the elbow with that left hook. Jumped on him, went for the knockout, looked for the rear naked choke, didn't get it, landed some more ground and pound, and eventually locked up that rear naked choke and got the sub. That was a fight where I was against Jun Young Park. Then I picked Jun Young Park in the battle against Andre Muniz because I figure if he can survive early, he can break Muniz down the stretch. He almost did in the third round, but it didn't happen. The grappling, the top control, the back control, the pressure was too much for Jun Young Park, and Andre Muniz wins that fight via decision. That's a fight that I believe Jun Young Park should have been able to finish. But it is what it is. He got out grappled and got controlled, played too long in the area that Muniz is the best at, which is on the ground, in the top position, taking your back, putting the hooks in, looking for subs and controlling you, looking for ground and pound. Brad Tavares isn't going to have that trouble because he has some of the best takedown defense in the history of the UFC. Jun Young Park is not taking down Brad Tavares, and then it turns into a striking match. I think Jun Young Park is not a bad striker at all. He uses a good jab. He fights a lot behind his jab. He has a good right hand, can throw elbows over the top, uppercuts up the middle. But I think Brad Tavares is more clean, or is the cleaner striker and more technical than Jun Young Park. And based on the fact that he has good takedown defense, I kind of feel like Tavares is going to get the chance to shine here. We always have to worry about the durability of Tavares because he does not have the best chin. There's always the possibility that Tavares gets knocked out and then, that's it. That's the end of the fight. It's just the way that he is. Like, he wins a lot of fights, but at the same time, the guy can come in and can get knocked out with one shot, can get knocked out with combinations. Got knocked out by Bruno Silva, got knocked out by Edmund Shabazian, got knocked out by Gregory Rodriguez at the beginning of the third round because his opponent just pushed forward and got in his face and tried to take him out as quick as he could. And I think in this fight, there's a chance that Tavares gets knocked out again. He's 20-9 on the UFC website. It says 20-10, 17-6 on the side of his opponent. But 5 of his 9 losses come by KO. He's never been submitted, and he's lost 4 by decision. He got that unanimous decision win over Chris Weidman. I'm surprised it wasn't a TKO due to those low kicks. He lost to Gregory Rodriguez. He lost to Bruno Silva. That was a fight where I thought that the chin of Silva would give out before the chin of Tavares. It didn't happen. He got knocked out early on in the first round. Went to decision with the middleweight champion, though, in Dricus du Plessis. In a decently close fight, man. Tavares looked pretty good in that one. Before that, won a decision over Omari Akhmedov, won a decision over Antonio Carlos Jr., and then went to decision with Israel Adesanya. So decisions with Dricus du Plessis and Israel Adesanya. The du Plessis fight was much closer than the Adesanya one was, but he went to decision and could have won, but the damage on the side of du Plessis was too much. I don't see Jun Young Park as a fighter who really can cause a ton of damage to a guy like Tavares on the feet. He's not a bad striker. He's decent. Out of his 17 wins, 5 by KO, 6 by submission, 6 by decision. So he's pretty much even across the board. He can beat you by decision. He can beat you by submission. He can beat you by KO. When it comes to Tavares, Tavares usually goes to decision in most of his fights. 13 wins by decision, 5 KOs, 2 submissions. Usually you're going to be going the full 15 with Tavares, but he can get KOs. I think Tavares is the cleaner fighter. I think that the takedowns of Jun Young Park aren't really going to be there, and the fight's going to play out pretty close in terms of a striking matchup, but I think the speed and power of Tavares and his ability to slip and roll shots is going to be a little bit too much for the Iron Turtle. I think he's going to get outstruck. He's going to get outpointed by Brad Tavares. Tavares is going to stuff the takedowns and land the more damaging shots on the feet, but again, he's always a liability in terms of his chin, and Jun Young Park could land a big shot on the inside, hurt him, rock him, and then maybe Tavares isn't able to recover. But I think Tavares wins this one. I think he outstrikes Jun Young Park, lands some good kicks, stuffs the takedowns, lands his boxing combinations, and I think he wins this fight via decision. I'm going to go Brad Tavares to come in and win 29-28 unanimous decision. Get 2 rounds to 1. I think Park has some success with his jab, has some success pushing Tavares up against the cage, but overall I think Tavares just outstrikes him, lands the cleaner shots, and wins via decision. So my pick is going to be Brad Tavares, 29-28 unanimous decision. But again, picking a fighter like Tavares, you always got to be worried that maybe he gets clipped on the chin and the fight's over. But the pick's going to be Tavares via decision. All right, and now we move to the main event of the evening in the women's strawweight division between Amandina Lemos taking on Verna Jandiroba. Man, another fight that this is striker versus grappler, and whoever is able to get off their game is going to win the fight. I know that's a very easy way to break it down, but that's just how it's going to be. Amanda Lemos keeps this on the feet. She's going to beat the ever-living shit out of the one-eyed pirate in Verna Jandiroba, not Shara Magomedov. If Verna Jandiroba can consistently get takedowns, and watch out for the ninja choke of Amanda Lemos, because she likes to put that head on the inside when they go for takedowns and then try to lock up the ninja choke like she did. She tried it against Mackenzie Dern. She tried it against Zhang Weili. Got very close on the Weili attempt. But aside from that, like, Jandiroba's okay on the feet, but she has a good right hand and like a good 1-2, and that's really all she throws. And then on the side of Lemos, she's just a lot more patient on the feet. She doesn't leave as many openings. She's in and out. She throws good low kicks, very good calf kicks, good 1-2s, a beautiful left hook, throws her combinations together, but sometimes she can overcommit on her combinations and give up takedowns. And once you take down a girl like Amanda Lemos, she can get controlled. Like, does she get submitted very often? No, but she got taken down by Mackenzie Dern, who is not a good offensive wrestler. She's a good offensive grappler. Jandiroba is a much better offensive wrestler than anybody that Lemos has faced, aside from maybe Zhang Weili. And I think that Jandiroba can get those takedowns. She can, chain from single leg to double leg and work those takedowns. But Lemos has gone longer in like 5-round fights, and we've seen that she does carry her power even in the later rounds. And if Jandiroba gets the takedowns, but Lemos gets back up to the feet and can keep it at a striking distance, she's going to box the face off of Jandiroba. She's going to kick her leg off, and she can stuff takedowns. Like, she's not the best at stuffing takedowns, but we've seen her stuff a few, and she can stay safe on the ground and just kind of try to wait until the rounds are over. This being a 5-round fight, it makes it difficult, because I think the fighter who's going to have better cardio in round 4 and round 5, if it gets that long, is Amanda Lemos. But I also think that if she consistently gets taken down and controlled and Jandiroba doesn't really have to fight for the takedowns and she just keeps her on the mat and lands ground and pound, goes for submissions but doesn't get it, maybe Lemos is going to be too tired in those 4th and 5th rounds to really explode into any of her punches, and then it just becomes, can Jandiroba get the takedown, or can Jandiroba now compete on the feet with Lemos because she's so tired from having to fight off the heavy wrestling onslaught and grappling onslaught of a fighter like Jandiroba. I've never been a big fan of Jandiroba. I backed Lupe Godinez against Jandiroba. I've picked against Jandiroba multiple times on the podcast before. I think that this is exactly how we broke it down in the beginning. If the fight stays on the feet, Lemos is going to beat the shit out of Jandiroba. If the fight goes to the mat, Lemos probably can defend some submissions, but she'll lose based on control time, and the more takedowns that Jandiroba gets, the easier the fight's going to be for her the longer the fight goes. And we know that Lemos keeps her power later on in the fights. But really, I don't know who to pick here. I'm probably not the only one that has difficulty picking this. I've seen Jandiroba land a big shot on Amanda Ribas and hurt her. But then, you know, she lost 2 rounds and ended up losing a decision because she got tired based on the wrestling onslaught and got outstruck on the feet. And then I've seen Lemos get taken down in the first round and controlled completely by a girl who doesn't really have any wrestling but is just a really good grappler in Mackenzie Dern, then break her face in the second round and somehow follow her to the ground when that's exactly where she wants to be, and then somehow win the fight on a decision where I believe she did way more damage, but maybe that fight should have gone to Mackenzie Dern. So you got 2 fighters who make questionable fight IQ decisions, but they both can win in their different areas of the game. Stays on the feet, Lemos wins. Goes to the floor, Jandiroba wins, whether it's getting a submission, ground and pound, or winning on control time. There's a much bigger difference on the feet, I think, for Lemos than there is on the ground for Jandiroba, because I think Lemos is smart enough to defend submissions and probably not get submitted, but we saw her get caught in a standing arm triangle choke from Jessica Andrade in the first round of their fight, so it's definitely possible that Lemos just gets caught in a bad position and gets subbed. I'm gonna pick another fight that's really hard to predict because it's just striker versus grappler. It stays on the feet, one person wins, goes to the ground, the other person wins. Lemos is live for that ninja choke. We've seen her go for it before. I think she can go for it here. It'll probably be there based on the wrestling of Jandiroba, but Jandiroba's just so bad on the feet. I get afraid picking her because, you know, every fight starts on the feet. I'm gonna pick, man, drum roll please. I'm gonna go with Amanda Lemos. I've picked her a bunch of times. I've seen her win fights that she shouldn't win. I've seen her find ways to win in fights that she was losing. I think Lemos finds the chin of Jandiroba and puts her down. I think she puts her down. Would I be surprised if Jandiroba wins? No. I would not be surprised if she takes her down and out wrestles her for as long as the fight goes. Favorite bet, under 4.5 rounds. I'm sure it'll probably be slight plus money. Don't love the fight at all. I think the fight is exactly how we called it. Striker versus grappler. Stays one way, one person wins. Goes the other way, the other person wins. But I'll go with the power and the bigger moments for Amanda Lemos in the fight. Knowing that she's going to expect a takedown, she might get hit with some big shots from Jandiroba. Maybe that right hand lands a couple times. But I think Lemos just does more damage. Lands big shots on a girl who doesn't have good defense. And stuffs enough takedowns to eventually find a TKO and put Jandiroba out. I'll go third round TKO for Amanda Amandina Lemos over Verna Jandiroba. But I wouldn't be surprised if Jandiroba finds ground and pound or finds a sub and just slows down Amanda Lemos. But the pick is Lemos. Third round TKO over Verna Jandiroba. That's it for my preview, predictions, and breakdown for this card. Again, very difficult card to predict. Insanely difficult card to bet. I wouldn't even pre-bet anything on this card. That's how much I think this card's how hard I think this card's gonna be, I should say. But I'm your host, Double M. This is the Touch 'Em Up podcast. This is my preview and predictions for UFC Fight Night Vegas. Lemos versus Jandiroba. Let's try to make some money this week, and let's enjoy the fights this weekend.